So, imagine taking history's greatest moral philosopher, I mean, the absolute bedrock of an entire civilization,
Right.
and just telling him to, pack up his desk and retire.
It is a pretty wild concept to wrap your head around.
It really is. We are talking about someone whose name is globally synonymous with wisdom and righteousness, someone whose ideas have, well, shaped cultural foundations for millennia.
Yeah, and you're looking at a writer who steps up and says, actually, this towering, untouchable icon needs to be permanently retired.
Exactly. It's like the ultimate contrarian argument, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You are taking aim at the very core of a culture's philosophical identity and actively trying to dismantle it piece by piece.
So if you're someone who loves uncovering those contrarian perspectives and, you aren't afraid to see established wisdom questioned, this deep dive is definitely for you.
For sure.
We are analyzing a highly provocative essay from 2014 by a writer named Zhu Feng. It was translated by Treasure and edited by Kakir. And the title just simply states the premise. It's called Confucius Should Retire.
But before we get into the actual mechanics of this essay, we really need to set some ground rules for our discussion today.
Yeah, that's a good point. We should be clear about our angle here.
Right. Our goal today is not to take a stance on whether Confucius is objectively good or bad. And we are certainly not here to endorse Stein's viewpoint as absolute truth.
Yeah, not at all.
We are acting entirely as impartial guides. We're just unpacking this fascinating, highly critical argument to see exactly how an author goes about, well, deconstructing a saint.
And what's structurally really fascinating about this essay is that Shuifeng doesn't just, come out swinging blindly.
No, he doesn't.
He actually opens by establishing exactly what Confucius is good for. He creates this sharp contrast right out of the gate by conceding that, yes, Confucius is worthy of respect as a Chinese national thinker and as an educator.
Yeah, he specifically singles out Confucius's educational theories as highly praiseworthy.
Right, which makes the critique hit harder.
Exactly. That concession is a vital rhetorical move. Zhou is drawing a hard line between respecting a man's practical curriculum and, worshiping him as a divine figure.
Like separating the lesson plan from the teacher?
Precisely.
Yeah.
The essay argues that the danger lies solely in taking those specific educational theories and using them to crown Confucius as this infallible saint.
Oh, I see.
And then the real issue for Zhou is promoting that saintly image to the outside world. He claims that elevating a good teacher to the status of a global moral compass is just a disaster.
That distinction actually makes a lot of sense when you think about the scope of someone's expertise.
Okay.
Well, it's like having a brilliant middle management coach, right? Their specific training manuals on how to run a team are highly effective.
Sure.
But if you try to make that same middle manager the ultimate moral guru and spiritual leader for the entire corporation,
Things fall apart quickly.
right, because a syllabus for societal organization doesn't mean you hold the answers to the universe.
Right.
But it begs the question, if he is such a highly praised educator, why does he fail Xu Feng's test for sainthood?
Well, the essay argues it comes down to a massive philosophical blind spot, specifically a blind spot regarding what it actually means to be human.
Okay, so how does Xu Feng categorize that blind spot?
He does it by dividing philosophy into two parts, the branches and the root.
The branches and the root, okay.
Right. So the essay claims that Confucius only ever understood the branches and the leaves of morality,
Meaning what exactly?
meaning he understood concepts like benevolence, righteousness, courtesy, wisdom, and credibility.
Basically the social rules.
Exactly. He was highly skilled at telling people how to be gentle, modest, or thrifty in their everyday daily interactions.
But I mean, on the surface, if someone is teaching benevolence and courtesy, they sound exactly like a saint.
They do, yeah.
Those are the exact traits we typically associate with profound moral leadership.
And they are excellent traits for maintaining social order, but Zhu Feng argues they are superficial outgrowths. They're just the branches.
So what's the root? What did he miss?
What Confucius completely missed was the root, which the essay identifies as the Tao.
The Tao.
Yes, Zhou Feng defines the Tao in this context as the fundamental unifying virtue of simply being a mortal human being. It's this foundational faith and cosmic awareness.
Okay, if you're listening to this and thinking, missing the root sounds a bit abstract, Think about it like a brilliant architect who designs a massive, ornate house.
I like that analogy.
Right. So Confucius essentially designed these beautiful stained glass windows, hand-carved mahogany doors, intricate crown molding.
The courtesy and the righteousness.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
the social etiquette, but he completely forgot to pour a concrete foundation.
Wow, yeah.
Without the Tao, without that foundational understanding of inherent human worth, the house might look spectacular from the street, but it's fundamentally fragile. It's just prone to sinking under its own weight.
That's a perfect way to visualize it.
Yeah.
And the author actually uses Confucius's own ancient texts to prove this structural flaw.
Oh, really? He uses his own words against him.
He does. Zoifeng pulls a famous quote from the Analects of Confucius, specifically the Li Ren section. Confucius states, having heard Tao in the morning, one may die content in the evening.
Okay, wait.
Zoifeng uses this.
Sorry to interrupt, but I have to push back on that interpretation.
Go ahead.
When I hear the phrase, having heard Tao in the morning, one may die content in the evening, that sounds like profound, humble self-awareness.
Sure, that's the traditional read.
Right. It sounds like a man who realizes the universe is infinite, and he is just a tiny part of it, constantly seeking a higher truth.
Yeah.
It's just strange that Zoifeng weaponizes this specific quote to prove Confucius was a failure who died with macroscopic regrets, rather than viewing him as this noble, lifelong seeker of truth.
You're right, Zoifeng's reading of that text is highly aggressive, but it forms the absolute bedrock of his critique.
How so?
He frames that lifelong longing not as humility, but as a tragic admission of ultimate defeat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in Zoifeng's framework, a true saint, a spiritual and moral compass for an entire civilization, cannot spend their entire life merely wishing they understood the root of existence.
A saint actually has to grasp the root.
Exactly. A saint must grasp it. By using Confucius's own words, Zoifeng is cementing the idea that the philosopher was hollow at his core. He lacked the deep, grounding faith required of a true global icon.
Okay, so if his philosophy was just a collection of branches and leaves without that grounding root of the Tao, how did that actually play out, like when he interacted with real people?
That's where things get really interesting.
Because the essay doesn't just leave this in the realm of abstract metaphysics, right?
No, not at all. Zoifeng connects this cosmic blind spot directly to rampant, everyday elitism.
Walk us through that causality, because that seems like a big leap.
The causality here is crucial. The Tao acts as the great equalizer. If everyone is connected to the Tao, then everyone has inherent divine worth simply by existing.
So a farmer and an emperor are spiritually equal.
Precisely. But if you remove the Tao from your philosophy, the only way to measure a person's worth is by looking at their social utility.
Ah, I see. You judge them based on how well they perform those branches and leaves of etiquette.
Exactly. And because common laborers don't spend their days practicing high court courtesy, Confucius, according to Zoifeng, viewed them as inherently inferior beings.
And we actually see this mechanism in action through a specific story the author pulls, right?
Yes, from the Analects of Confucius, the Zailu section.
Right. The story revolves around a student named Fan Qi.
Yeah.
So Fan Qi approaches Confucius and earnestly asks to learn how to plant crops. And Confucius just completely dismisses him. He basically says, I am not as good as the farmers.
It's a complete brush off.
Yeah, and then Fan Qi follows up asking to learn about growing vegetables. And Confucius dismisses him again, saying, I am not as good as vegetable growers.
The dismissal is total. Confucius doesn't offer to learn alongside his student, nor does he validate the importance of the question.
He just shuts him down.
Yeah, he actively separates himself from the very labor that sustains his own society.
So if you're listening to this, imagine a modern MBA student paying an exorbitant amount in tuition, approaching this esteemed, tenured Ivy League business professor.
Good analogy.
Right. And the student asks, Professor, can you show me how the supply chain actually works on the factory floor? Like, how do the actual machines operate?
Yeah.
And the professor just scoffs, rolls his eyes, and says, I have no idea. Go ask a guy in a forklift.
It perfectly highlights that massive disconnect.
It really does. The disconnect between the lofty academic tower and the dirt under your fingernails reality of how the world actually functions.
And that scenario captures the exact friction Zoifeng is pointing out. Confucius is positioned as the ultimate teacher of life, yet he views the life-sustaining labor of the common people and entirely beneath his station.
Which is wild for a moral philosopher.
The essay uses this to show that without the root of the Tao, his philosophy naturally curdles into a strict, unsympathetic hierarchy.
But the refusal to teach Fan Qi about farming is really only the setup here.
Oh yeah, the aftermath is worse.
What happens after Fan Shi leaves the room is what Xu Feng uses to deliver the final blow to Confucius's moral character.
Yeah, it's pretty damning.
Because once the student exits, Confucius doesn't just, calmly return to his scrolls. He actively insults his own student behind his back.
Right. He exclaims, "What an inferior person Fan Shi is."
Wait, he actually waits until the student is out of earshot to disparage him?
Yes. And then Confucius launches into a monologue that Xu Feng highlights as the absolute ultimate proof of his flawed character.
What does he say?
Confucius explains that superior people don't need to learn how to farm because they possess different tools.
Different tools like courtesy and righteousness.
Exactly. He argues that if superior people use courtesy, ordinary people will be forced to revere them.
Wow.
And if superior people use righteousness, ordinary people will be forced to obey them.
And Confucius finishes that thought by basically saying that if you utilize courtesy and righteousness, the common people will just flock to you from all over. They'll bring their children and they will basically serve you.
Right.
The implication Xu Feng draws from this is just chilling. I mean, why learn to work the land when you can simply master the behavioral rules required to manipulate the masses into working it for you?
It's pure manipulation.
Yeah.
And Xu Feng synthesizes this entire incident into a single devastating critique using two specific terms.
Okay, what are they?
He concludes that Confucius was microscopically prudent, but macroscopically confused.
Microscopically prudent, but macroscopically confused. Let's break those terms down because they really represent the core of Xu Feng's thesis here.
Let's do it.
Being microscopically prudent means Confucius understood the granular mechanics of social control perfectly, right? He knew exactly which branches and leaves, which rules of courtesy and righteousness to leverage to manage a population.
He was a master of the interpersonal transaction.
Yeah, knowing how to extract reverence and obedience on a day-to-day micro level.
But then, being macroscopically confused means that when you zoom out to the big picture of human flourishing, he was entirely lost.
Because he lacked basic empathy.
Right. He lacked empathy and kindness. He looked at the vast majority of the population and saw them not as fellow human beings possessing their own inherent virtue, but merely as tools.
Tools to be managed by this superior class.
Exactly. Because he missed the grand, unifying root of the Tao. His entire worldview was fractured at the macro level.
But, couldn't you argue that maintaining strict social harmony, even if it seems highly elitist and manipulative by our modern standards, was a necessary macroscopic survival tool for a chaotic ancient world?
That is a very common defense.
Because during the time Confucius lived, social cohesion was literally a matter of life and death for a civilization. Perhaps this strict hierarchy wasn't a lack of empathy, but just a practical blueprint for keeping society from tearing itself apart.
That is the standard historical defense of his work, absolutely. But Xu Feng's counter-argument, which is embedded within the essay, is that a true saint transcends their specific era.
Ah, I see.
If a philosophy relies on an underclass being permanently manipulated and viewed as inferior just to keep the societal engine running, then it isn't universal spiritual wisdom.
It's just ancient political science.
Exactly. Xu Feng is saying that a philosophy built on the systemic disrespect of laborers cannot bring true blessings to a society. It doesn't matter how orderly it makes things look on the surface.
It's fascinating because the essay forces you to look at the interpersonal dynamic of that Fan Shi incident and ask a very uncomfortable question.
It really does.
Does a teacher who acts unkindly, who refuses to earnestly help a student to his face, but instead waits for him to leave just to belittle them as inferior?
Yeah.
Does a person who behaves that way even deserve the title of a great moral teacher?
And Xu Feng's answer is a resounding no.
Right.
The author is arguing that the foundation was rotten from the start. No matter how hard Confucius strove to perfect the rules of society, his macroscopic view of humanity was fundamentally flawed.
Because it was rooted in manipulation rather than profound spiritual empathy.
Exactly. The beautiful house he built had no foundation, and therefore it is inherently unstable.
Which brings us to Xu Feng's final blunt verdict. Because of these macroscopic flaws, because of these deep-seated elitism, and especially given the development of modern egalitarian society, Confucius simply needs to retire.
Yes.
The essay concludes that his framework, which relies entirely on a rigid hierarchy of superior managers and inferior laborers, simply does not fit the modern world. We have outgrown the need for his specific brand of social management.
And engaging with texts that systematically deconstruct untouchable icons like this is such a powerful exercise in critical thinking.
It really shakes up how you view history.
It prevents us from passively absorbing historical figures as flawless saints without ever stopping to examine their actual behavior, their blind spots, and the real-world implications of their doctrines.
Right. It forces you to look past the bronze statues and the sanitized quotes.
Exactly. We are forced to ask ourselves whether we are revering a person because their ideas are truly universally ethical today, or if we were just coasting on the momentum of thousands of years of cultural habit.
You really have to rebuild your understanding of a figure from the primary sources up. You have to look at stories like the Fanchi incident and decide for yourself what kind of character is actually on display.
And whether that character deserves the pedestal they occupy. You are taking the blueprints of the house, noticing the missing foundation, and deciding whether or not you still want to live in it.
That is perfectly said. And I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, lingering question to ponder on your own. It builds on this idea of deconstruction, but takes it one step further.
Okay.
If we actively strip away the mythical sainthood of our historical icons, if we intentionally expose all of their human flaws, their biases, their two-faced moments, and their elitism, do their practical teachings actually become more useful to us today because we can finally view them objectively?
That's a great question.
Or does a philosophy lose its power entirely once we realize the architect behind it was deeply, fundamentally flawed? Think about that the next time you see a monument to a towering historical figure.